Hi everyone, I'm Mandy Peltier and I am an artist and instructor. Welcome to my first YouTube video. I predominantly use the fine art medium of colored pencil because I love their versatility, their durability, their portability, their cleanliness. The paints really affect the yield, and I also love the detail work you can get with the point of a pencil. So it's really great. I do work in other media and I hope to have some videos using other media as well. But I have a really big heart for beginners. I was once a beginner. I know how it feels to learn something new and to get excited about it and to maybe discover a talent within yourself that you didn't know you possess. I know that when I found colored pencils, I found a bit of myself too. And so I like to pay that forward by teaching beginners and just really making beginner-friendly content. In December of 2019, I decided I wanted to write a series of beginner-friendly tutorials that would be available for free that would showcase the versatility of colored pencil. And I wanted to do that by writing these tutorials across a wide range of surfaces. So Dura-Lar film, or sometimes called drafting film, wood, sanded paper, clayboard, I mean, you name it. I wanted to write a series of beginner-friendly tutorials across a wide variety of surfaces. And you know as well as I do that time is always of the essence and there never seems to be enough of it. So I have only written one so far, and that is a Lollipop tutorial that's on Dura-Lar film. And this is what I'm going to be doing in this video, or drawing in this video. I had a few people download it who asked if I had a video, and I said no, not yet, but maybe one of these days I'll record one, and today's the day. So if you want to draw this along with me, you will want to go to my website, mandypeltier.com, MandyPeltier.com. And there's a header that says tutorials. Click on tutorials and then you'll see where you can download the PDF of this. You don't need to necessarily print this out if you just want to view it from your screen, but I would encourage everyone to at least print out page 14, which is the outline of the Lollipop. Since this is a beginner-friendly tutorial, I'm not expecting anyone to freehand draw the Lollipop. And there's a few other supplies that are needed. They're all listed in the tutorial itself, and I'll also list the needed supplies on this video, but I'll go through them really quickly. The surface, again, is Graphics Dura-Lar film. It's the .005 two-sided matte film. You can buy it on Amazon, Dick Blick, Jerry's Artorama. It's fairly easy to find online. And you'll want to take one sheet and cut it to 4x6 in size. And then very quickly, the other supplies you're going to need: a roll of artist tape, a Tombow Mono Zero eraser. You could probably get away with another eraser, but the reason why I love the Tombow Mono Zero eraser is look how small that is. And so it's really easy to erase just a small area. This tutorial also uses 6 Prismacolor Premier pencils: Crimson Red, White, Tuscan Red, Light Aqua, Pale Vermilion, and 50% French Gray. So I hope you will draw along with me, and I hope we have a lot of fun doing it. All right, so we are ready to get started. I have the full-sized outline here on my drafting table, and I'm going to line up my piece of Dura-Lar film over it. And I'm going to secure it at the top at this point with a little piece of artist tape just to keep it from sliding around and moving it when we add color. So the first color we're going to use is Pale Vermilion, and we're going to add that to each of the colored stripes. We're going to use regular handwriting pressure, and we're going to follow the direction of each of these stripes. Now I'm using a back and forth stroke, and I'm doing my best to keep my strokes even, both in pressure and in distance between strokes. You can't really tell it's a back and forth stroke when you look at it because it's so even. Now you may not have to do this, but I have to rotate my work as I go. Otherwise it makes it hard for me to stay in the lines. So I'm going to work my way around this entire Lollipop using this back and forth stroke, handwriting pressure, following the curve of each of these colored stripes. I am working from light value to dark value, in this project. And the reason why I'm using handwriting pressure is I don't want to use so much pressure that it's going to make it hard to go over top of this with other colors. Drafting film or Dura-Lar film, both of them, don't really have much tooth. You can really only get a few layers on one side of the film. The good news about this surface is that you can work on the front side and the back side to give you a bit more flexibility and a bit more room for adjustments. Now I'm just going to speed up this video as I fill in each of these colored stripes with pale vermilion. Again, using handwriting pressure, a back and forth stroke, following the curve of each of these stripes and making them fully covered with a light pressure. Okay, so now I have each of these stripes, the colored stripes with some pale vermilion on it. There's a few areas where I went outside of the lines, and that is part of the reason why we're using this Tombow Mono Zero eraser, is we can easily erase those little areas to keep everything right as it should be. So if you need to, before your next step, just use light pressure, just light enough to remove it from those areas where you might have just went outside of the lines a little. All right, and that's good for that. We're still on step one. We just basically completed the first start of step one. The second part of step one is to apply the same color, pale vermilion, using pressure 2, which is slightly softer than handwriting pressure, and a vertical back and forth stroke to only the left half of the popsicle stick. I find that using a ruler for this really helps. I'm going to begin by sharpening my pale vermilion. I use a Repusco 64 sharpener. It gives the pencil a nice sharp point. It's one of those manual sharpeners that pull the pencil in versus shaking them like an automatic pencil sharpener, which I find really helpful. Now I'm going to take the ruler and I'm going to place it along the left edge of the lollipop stem just to keep me where I need to be to make sure that I don't go outside of the lines. Now I'm going to use the same pale vermilion to gently fill in the color along the left side of the lollipop stem now that I have that line to sort of keep me where I need to be. And that's good right there. Perfect. Now the next color you'll want to find is the 50% French gray. And we're going to use that using only pressure 1. Pressure 1 is really light pressure. It's really the lightest pressure you can do. We just want to add a touch of this color to the other half of the lollipop stick. And to help me kind of stay within the lines, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the pale vermilion, and I'm going to line up a ruler right along that left edge. It's so cool with drafting film how you can lay it over your photo reference and see right through it to your reference to color on top of. You cannot do that with a lot of other surfaces. We would have had to transfer the outline using a graphite transfer paper or maybe a light box. So it's so cool with this paper. We can just lay it right over the line drawing. Okay. Now what we're going to do this gets a little bit tricky. The last part of step 1 is we're going to apply the same color, 50% French gray, using that pressure that's slightly softer than handwriting pressure, slightly lighter, still using a back and forth stroke, which is the same stroke you would just color with as a child. And we're going to follow the direction and curve of each white stripe, but apply this color to the shadow areas. So this means we're not going to be applying this color to the entirety of each white stripe like we did to the colored stripes. We're only going to be applying it to the parts that are shadowed. So if I were to look at my photo reference, which is on page 13 of the printout, it's only going to be to the shadowed part here, maybe where these two stripes meet, and here and down here. So it's mostly going to be the top and the bottom of each of those white stripes. Let me demonstrate that for you. And I'm keeping my my photo reference next to me as I work and apply 50% French gray to the darker shadows of each light stripe. Again, I have to turn my paper or I risk not staying within the lines. And my strokes, my back and forth strokes, are still following the curve of each stripe. I'm not necessarily going at it in this direction. I want them to follow the curve of the stripe. But where I'm ending my strokes also varies because the shadow isn't a perfect rectangle on each stripe. It varies a little bit. It stops in some sections different than where it stops in other sections. So I want to be mindful of that, and it will help it have more of a photorealistic look when I'm done if I'm able to achieve that variation in where I apply my color. One thing I'm going to do here is I am going to kind of define where one stripe meets the next so they don't sort of blend together. So for those areas, I might increase my pressure slightly or at least go over that section a few times just so that it stands out a bit from the surrounding stripes. And here's the last one. And so I might further define this little curve here, perhaps this one here. Just a little, so you can tell that they're two different stripes and not the same one. And we are now ready for step 2, which is found on page 5 of the tutorial. In this step, we're going to continue adding colors to all the stripes on the lollipops. We've been working from light value to dark value, at least on the colored stripes, by starting with an orangey pale vermilion. But now we're going to go in with a red, crimson red, and we're going to apply this color to each stripe in the exact same manner that we applied the pale vermilion. So you're going to use a back and forth stroke, keep your strokes tight together, even. On this particular step, you can lighten up on your pressure just a bit because we still want some other colors. We want to add some other colors to these stripes. So when I say it's the exact same, the stroke is the same, following the directions of each stripe is the same, but do lighten up on your pressure just a touch. Instead of using handwriting pressure, just use slightly lighter pressure than that. And if you need to twist your work like I do to stay within the lines, that's totally fine. I really have to do that. I try not to in my workshops and classes because then I feel like the students have to look at my work sideways, but I truly cannot stay in the lines if I don't twist. So just follow along with me here, and I'm going to speed this video up so that I'm not taking forever trying to color in these stripes with you, and I will speak again when I get this particular part of step 2 finished. Okay, the next part of step 2 is to apply white using the same pressure as we just applied crimson red, so just slightly softer than handwriting pressure, to the entirety of each white stripe. This means we're going to apply it over the 50% French gray we applied in step 1. And we're still going to follow the curve and direction of every stripe, and we're going to go over that 50% French gray. The white will somewhat lighten that color. And I love how applying the red over the orange made it a slightly more vivid orangey red color than what it would have been if we hadn't applied that color over top. And I got something on this stripe, but the nice thing about drafting film is it erases super easily. You do just have to be careful, because I have found sometimes that the oils from your fingers and hands can affect Dura-Lar's ability to receive color. That's probably, I would say, the biggest negative about this surface. So again, just apply white over every color you've already applied on each of the white stripes, including that 50% French gray we applied in the last step. Now, if you have some of the orange color kind of rub off like it did in those couple of areas, that's okay. We can either fix that later, or it'll kind of get hidden as we continue to apply color to this piece. Don't worry too much about that. When you're done applying white, you might be a little unsure about where you applied it and where you didn't, because it kind of blends in with the paper that's underneath. So you can sort of lift it up, and then, oh, I see I missed here, and I even see a spot where I didn't add color right over on that stripe. So lifting it up can kind of help you see where you applied it and where you might still yet need to apply it. I believe it, yeah, this stripe right here, I think I failed to add the 50% French gray to that one too. That's not a big deal. That's okay. I can just go right back over with a 50% French gray and add it in now. It looks like I added it to the bottom part, just not to the top part. So that's okay. And now I can go in with the white. All right, now the third part of step 2 is we're going to apply using handwriting pressure, 50% French gray, and a back and forth stroke to the very far left edge of the lollipop stem. I'm going to get my ruler out again, and I'm going to press fairly hard on it so it'll take the color, blow it away, and you can see it has a nice crisp sharp line on the left that will kind of function as its shadow. And now the last part of step 2 is we're going to take a slightly dull white, which it should already be slightly dull because we just used it on all the white stripes. We're going to apply it to all of the stem other than to that line we just drew with the 50% French gray. I'm going to start off using a back and forth stroke, and I'm using handwriting pressure here, and I'm just going to cover the orange, and I'm going to cover the French gray that we applied in the last step. But then I'm going to kind of twist it and kind of go at it sideways with sort of a scumbling stroke to help it all sort of blend together. The stem can get away from you if you let it, if you use too heavy of pressure in the first step. And the stem doesn't exactly look like the photo reference, and that was sort of to just limit the number of colors for this project. It was also to make it look more cohesive and give it sort of that pop art look. So you can go over it a few times with the white, and we're not done with the stem. We are mostly just done with it as far as this side of the film goes, but we're gonna work on the back side here. And that completes step 2. If you are with me, well done so far. Keep up the great work. Welcome to step 3. This step, we are going to be working on the wrong side or the back side of the drafting film. So at this point, we can sort of get rid of the outline. We don't need it anymore. What I like to do is I just like to flip it to the wrong side so that I have a white paper to work on, and then I'll flip my lollipop on top of it and then secure the top of it with that same piece of artist tape. Artist tape is somewhat reusable. So in step 3, we're going to use the heaviest pressure yet. We are going to use a pressure that is heavier than your handwriting pressure. So don't be too concerned about using heavier pressure than you think you may need. This is really one of the only colors we're going to be applying to the back side. So to all of the red stripes, we're going to use pressure 4 in crimson red, and we're going to add that color to all of the stripes. And you'll have to forgive me, my kids are in the background. Because of coronavirus, they're home and they're kids and they're loud. But I didn't want to delay making this video anymore. So please just be patient with that. All right, so I'm just still following the direction of the curves as I apply this color. But I'll show you what this does. I'm just going to flip this. You can see how much more that saturates this stripe compared to all the other stripes when I add red to the back side. So this is really going to cause this whole lollipop to become saturated by adding color to the back. All right, so just work along with me as we apply a heavy layer of crimson red to all of the dark colored or red colored stripes. right, so I got the crimson red in, and I'm gonna flip it to the other side just to see if there's any areas where maybe I veered too far. But you know, that looks pretty good to me. So I think I'm happy with that, and I'm gonna flip it back around. But you can see that I made this, you know, very saturated, very heavy layer of this crimson red. And you'll also see that drafting film kind of gives like a shiny cast to the colored pencil. So I do apologize for that, but I want the light on so that you can see my work surface a little bit better. After crimson red, we're going to apply the same solid saturated concentration of color using white to all the white stripes. So exact same way as the crimson red, just apply white in the same manner. If you get my tutorial or download my tutorial from my website, make sure you read through it before doing this tutorial. And you know, I understand that's probably something I should have said in the beginning or even in step 1. But I'm trying to be pretty detailed with information in this video, but the tutorial itself that you can download from my website is even more detailed. I try to leave nothing to the imagination. So please be sure to read through it. And if you have any questions that I don't answer on this video, you can of course send me an email at contact@mandypeltier.com, or you can leave a comment on this video. But my guess is it's more than likely answered in the tutorial itself. Okay, so I think I have white pretty well covering the lollipops, the white stripes of the lollipops. So now the next step we're going to do is we're going to further define the darkest edge of the lollipop stem by adding another sharp layer of 50% French gray to it. And that sound you hear in the background is me sharpening my pencil to a sharp point. And I'm going to flip this upside down again because it's just the angle I like to work from. And I'm going to get that ruler out. I'm going to line it up against the lollipop stem from the other side. And I'm going to draw right on top of it from the back side, just to darken it up a bit. And then the last part of step 3 is to take your white again. And you're going to apply it to the entire lollipop stem other than to the line we just drew with 50% French gray. So we're going to add white over it all. And I'm going to try and make a nice square out of this. If you need to use your ruler, you can. I might as well. It doesn't hurt, right? Especially if you have it right there. And my tip of my pencil just broke. That's okay. That happens a lot when you're using a little bit heavier pressure. Not a big deal. But now I sort of have a better guideline of where to apply this color. And this is just going to kind of soften that pale vermilion color we added on the wrong, or on the right side, because we're working on the wrong side right now. All right, and so this is the end of step 3. Okay, we're ready for step 4. And on step 4, we're going to work on the front and back side, but we're going to start with the front side. I'm not going to bother taping this to the paper now that we don't have the outline underneath it. Like, we don't need to really line it up. But we're going to use a new color in this step called Tuscan Red. And this color is going to be used to darken the values on the red stripes. So you're going to continue to use that back and forth stroke. You can also use a really tight scumbling stroke, which is a circular stroke where you do not pick up your pencil. You just make a continual squiggly loop-to-loops on your paper that are so close together you can't tell that's what you're doing. Enlarged, it would look like this. Sort of how you would draw curly hair if you were a child and drawing curly hair on a little girl. But in the fine art capacity, we're going to do a really tight, controlled scumbling stroke, or you can do the back and forth stroke really close together like we've been doing. Enlarged, it looks like this. All right, so working on the right side of your film and using a sharp Tuscan Red, we are going to apply this color on the darkest areas of the red stripes to darken up those areas. So it's not going to be to the entirety of the red stripes, just to the darkest values, to the shadow areas. And I am using heavy pressure here to make sure that the color takes and that you can see it. And this is really like the last color that's going to be added to these red stripes, because we've used fairly heavy pressure on this particular tutorial, and so the film just really isn't going to take much else. Really, drafting film, you're lucky to get in more than 4 layers, I would say, unless you're just using super light pressure, which we're not. So I'm done with the back side, or front side, the correct side, and now I'm going to flip it to the back side, if I can get my fingers on it. And I'm going to do the same thing to the back side. I am going to apply Tuscan Red to the very darkest areas. So the very darkest areas, if you were looking at your photo reference, I'll get that here. the very darkest areas would be the black here on this stripe, this little section here, and this section here. You see how this or these areas are so much darker than just like this dark value or this dark value or this dark value. So you're going to be applying Tuscan red to the darkest values on the wrong side or back side. And I'm going to once again sharpen my pencil. And on the wrong side, I am going to apply it to the darkest area. So you need to remember, if you're working on the wrong side, it's going to be opposite of what you were doing on the front side. So that can be a bit of a brain teaser for you. If you're not sure how you're doing here, you can always flip it around to the right side, and you can see that these darkest areas are now even darker because of the Tuscan red we've applied on the back. And then you can compare it to your photo reference to see where you might want to go back on the other side and apply a touch more. Apply a little bit to this upper edge here. And you can always make adjustments later. You know, it's not like you have to be done completely with this step now and you can't go back and add anything else. It can be hard to flip this to the other side. So I think I'm happy with how that looks. And now the next step is kind of fun. We're still on step 4, but we're going to flip it back to the right side. And we are going to now use our Tombow eraser. I have it out quite a bit. We probably don't need quite that much, maybe just that much eraser on visible. And we're going to use this to bring out some of the highlights on the Lollipop. So we're going to gently and lightly erase some of the color, the pale vermilion and the crimson red that we first applied to the right side of the Lollipop in steps 1 and 2. And if you look at the photo reference, I'm always encouraging my students to look at the photo reference, not just the step in the guide. You see all these highlights on the red? So we could have worked around those highlights and then used a different color to put them in, but drafting film, you can lift color from it so easily, we might as well just erase the highlights because we have some crimson red on the back side that will kind of work as a lighter red color compared to everything else we've added. So we can just use the Tombow Mono Mini Eraser to just sort of lift some of the pigment and create some highlights. And then you'll see in the next step, we'll go over what we lift with an eraser with white. All right, so use your photo reference as your guide. I certainly will. And I'll start with the obvious stripes first. And I'm just going to kind of use a back and forth stroke. Start with light pressure. If that's not really lifting anything, you can increase to heavier pressure. And just lift some of the color off of the stripes where there's a highlight. Try and mimic what you see in the photo reference, but it's still going to look really good and realistic, even if you kind of go off and do your own thing. With some of them, I might just do vertical hatching strokes to erase. Others, I might kind of do back and forth. Just play around, have fun with it. It's not every stripe that needs this done. For this stripe, I'm angling my movement here. Same with this one and this one. But you can see how they're a little bit lighter here by lifting the pigment with the eraser. I think this is just a fun part of drafting film that you can do this. It's really nice. I know some artists who will erase a section of their drafting film in order to sign their name. So instead of saving that spot for their name, they may just erase it at the very end using an eraser. So I think that's just sort of fun. All right, and then I think I did not get this one here. All right, and then after you do that, that completes step 4. Okay, we are ready for step 5 now, and with this step we are going to go over what we lifted on the red stripes with white. So let me show you how we do this. I'm going to use pressure 3 to 5, and I'm kind of just going to do a bit of a hatching stroke, back and forth stroke to these sections. You see it takes the color really well because we lifted a lot of the pigment. So you might start light and then work up till 5 to pressure 5, which is shout or heavy pressure, as you get the hang of it. So I'm just working all the way around, adding white over what I lifted with the Tombow Mono Mini Eraser in step 4. And you can always make adjustments. It's not that what you lifted has to stay lifted. You can always go back over some of these areas with more crimson red if you feel like you lifted too much or it's not quite right. And I'll do that for you so you can see what I mean. All right, so I feel like it's almost a bit too much, how much white I've put in. So like I said, you can always go back in and make corrections. So I'm gonna go in with some more crimson red, and I might add a few more stripes over this white, and then kind of make it a back and forth game between the two colors until I'm happy with how it looks. And so just do this with all of your stripes, just kind of do that back and forth game to get each one looking good. You know, I'm not doing this, but you can even go in with Pale Vermilion if you want to add a bit more of a pop of orange to certain sections. That's totally fine too. This is your piece. We're about ready for the background here, so we're really just sort of making adjustments right now in lieu or in preparation, not in lieu of, in preparation for the background. And then one more thing I'm going to do is I'm seeing that some of my stripes are not really crisp on the edges. So I'm going to go in with crimson red very carefully, and I'm going to try and crisp some of these up. I'd rather do that now than after I add the background color. You kind of just get in the habit of stopping whatever you're doing when you hear that break of the tip. It happens. And I know this is not the highest quality video, and I apologize for that. Hopefully in time I can get the hang of this and give you some higher quality instruction, visually speaking. But hopefully I'm always improving as an instructor as well. All right, so I'm getting pretty happy with how that looks. It's always okay to make adjustments. That's how the art becomes your own, you know? And then I might even, I have to blow away the extra pigment. Or you can use a drafting brush. Sometimes I'll even get one of my paint brushes and sort of swipe at it. And if there's a few kind of stubborn areas, I'll first clean my eraser because there's some red on it from when we lifted the highlights. So I want to clean it so that I'm not wiping any red on it. And then I can use it to just slightly lift some of the stubborn pigment that doesn't want to come off. And just do it carefully. And then you can kind of go over the area with the color that's lacking or that more is needed. Oh, and I found another area where I kind of want to add a bit of crisp red. Oh, and see, I just smeared some red on there. Not a big deal. I'll just lift it gently with my eraser, wipe it away. That paintbrush is not working really well for what I want it to be doing, but I'm not entirely sure where my drafting brush is right now. Hence me sort of grabbing it because it was just right there. All right. And I think that's probably good enough for step 5. All right, so step 6 is probably the most time-intensive step, but it's not a hard step. You're going to take your light aqua and you're going to apply 2 layers using pressure 3 to the entirety of the background to each side. So 2 layers each side to fully draw in the background. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to get a clean sheet of paper because the paper I was using has gotten pretty dirty. So that I can see better, I'm getting a clean sheet of paper, and then I'm going to take my light aqua and I'm going to carefully apply it, pressure 3, to the entire background. I'm going to go ahead and use my trusty ruler for the Lollipop stem, each side of it, just to give me sort of a guide of where and where not to apply color. Along the bottom too, just to make sure I don't apply it where it doesn't belong. And then I'm just going to pretty quickly use a back and forth stroke, using whatever direction you need to in order to get it on. Don't worry too much about evenness either, because I'm going to show you a trick for the very last step on how you can kind of smooth out this color. Now, I will say that trick I'm going to teach you may not work for every little area, but it is a trick you can use on drafting film, especially if you're doing like a solid background color. And I also think this little trick I'm going to show you with the tortillon stump also adds a little bit of texture and movement to the background, which I find nice. And I think it works well with this sort of pop art theme that this lollipop is. The cool thing too is I really like the contrast between the red and orange and this sort of turquoise aqua color. I just find it really pleasing to the eye and lovely. And you don't really have to do the solid background color, or you could choose a different color for the background. It doesn't have to be this color. I just chose it because I really liked the combination of, you know, the light aqua compared to the red and the orange that we used on the dark stripes. So you can just see I'm moving pretty quickly. I'm not even necessarily now doing my strokes in the same direction. Really, the most important thing I'm concerned about is not applying my color too much onto the lollipop. I have gotten a little bit onto the red, but that's okay. It actually adds a little bit of color, but I'm just trying not to apply it too heavily on that section. And you can see I'm even overlapping a little, so some areas are thicker than others. That's okay, because you're going to see what we're going to do in just a little bit. All right, so again, you're going to add 2 layers of color to each side. I'm still on the first layer, right? So let me finish this layer and then I will start speeding it up the video as I apply the second layer to the front side and then apply both layers to the back side. Almost done with layer 1 on the front. All right, we are ready for the last step, which is super exciting. And this is the step we're going to need the tortillon stem for. Like I said in the intro, this is a number 4. You can likely use other sizes just fine, but I like this larger size because it just has a little bit more room to push the pigment around. And basically what we're going to use the tortillon stem for is to smooth out the background pigment. So I'm basically just going to take this and I'm just going to use sort of a scumbling stroke, and sorry, the camera is likely going to shake here quite a bit, and I'm going to just go over everything and I'm going to smooth it out. Now the areas that have a concentration of pigment, you may have to go over a few more times, and you may have a hard time discerning if it's on the wrong side or the right side, so you may just need to do a light tortillon blend to each side before you really focus on working out those little concentrations of pigment. That sort of happened by applying this color to the drafting film. There might be other techniques to smooth out color on drafting film. There's really not a right or wrong way, there's just different techniques, and this is just the technique that I use, and I think it's fun. And I think the end results are pleasing. This is the very first one I did, and you can see that by the time I'm done, it's going to be completely smooth. So that's basically the end goal we are doing here, is just to kind of smooth out this pigment. And then that will be it. We'll be done, unless there's other little adjustments you need to make to your piece. It's never too late to do that. Now, I do not fix my final pieces on drafting film with a fixative. I absolutely do when I'm working on sanded paper or just regular paper, wood I do, but with drafting film I don't. I just go ahead and frame it as is. I always do protect it behind a piece of plexiglass or glass. But you can see on this side where there's some concentrations of pigment, I might just hit it from a few different angles to smooth that pigment out. And so I'm just going to repeat this process until it all looks good. And if I need to add more color to any areas, I will. And I'll just kind of do a back and forth game, flipping from the front side to the wrong side until all the pigment is smooth and I'm happy with how it looks. The very last thing I want to show you is step 8, and it calls for the use of a little piece of a Swiffer pad, or pantyhose works fine. Anything that you have will work. I find that the Swiffer wet jet pad works the best. You can use the white part or the blue part. I usually use the blue part. And as you can see, you really don't need that big of a piece, but what this is going to help do is take off some of the shine and some of the visible pencil strokes that you see on your work. So I'm going to take it and I'm just going to, you don't have to be, too gentle with it. I'm probably using handwriting pressure and how I scrub. And you can see it doesn't really even rub off onto the Swiffer, but it might be hard to view on the screen, but what it does is it just sort of smooths your strokes and makes them a little less visible without actually lifting any of the pigment. I don't know if this is a secret. I'm assuming a lot of people do this, but you don't hear a lot of talk about people doing it. But this is really what sort of makes your final piece pop and sort of give it that smooth appearance. And I didn't add as many coats and I didn't use the tortillon stump on the background as much as I could have, but I just wanted to show you this. And on the very first one I did, that's why this sort of has more of a smooth appearance. And that is really bright. Let's see if I can, there we go. That's what makes this have more of a smooth appearance, is the fact that I took a Swiffer wet jet pad over it to just sort of smooth out those strokes. Thank you again for watching my video and for following along with my Lollipop tutorial. I sure hope your Lollipop turned out sweet, and I also hope that you'll share a copy of it with me so I can see what an amazing job you did. You can contact me and send me your picture at contact@mandypeltier.com, or you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mandypeltierartist. I look forward to hearing from you, and thanks again for watching.